to learn a little bit about RHNA and the city of Alhambra's process of going through its housing element update. My name is Chris Blakeney. I am a consultant with a firm called Echo Northwest. We are a West Coast-based consulting firm. We do this work up and down the West Coast, and we have been lucky enough to be partnering with the city of Alhambra for this effort to update the city's housing element of the general plan. So if you're paying attention to Alhambra, there's a lot going on right now in this space. The city in 2019 went through an effort to update its general plan. And there are 3 projects currently running concurrently. The East Main corridor project, which is very relevant to folks living in this district. My project, the housing element update, and the city's also going through a comprehensive zoning code update. And before I proceed, I should take a moment and just run through a little bit of logistics for the town hall today. You are able to ask questions in the Q&A chat, so please use the Q&A chat liberally. We can address some questions to the extent possible later. If you'd like to raise your hand, you can do that as well, and we have the opportunity for you to speak when we get to a Q&A portion. For those on the phone, if you press *9, that will raise your hand, effectively raise your hand and allow you to speak when called on. You can press *6 to unmute when you are called on. And as a part of this presentation, we will have a short poll. The first 2 questions of that poll are going to be multiple choice questions, so feel free to answer those as the poll question comes up. The third question is an open-ended question, and so you can just type your responses to that question into the chat box, and we'll be sure to take all those all that input and allocate it to that question accordingly. So on with the presentation. So if you're here today, then you've likely heard of this term RHNA before. And so we're going to begin today with a little bit of RHNA 101 and dispel some myths or distribute some information on what RHNA is. So RHNA is first and foremost, it's a process. It stands for Regional Housing Needs Allocation. It's a statewide process to determine the housing need on 8-year cycles. Different regions across the state are on different timelines. San Diego's already gone through their process. Sacramento's wrapping up their process. Here in Southern California and Alhambra, the cycle will run from October 2021 through October 2029. So the work that we're doing will, and this RHNA process will run through that cycle. RHNA is also a number. It's the number of units by level of affordability that represents Alhambra's fair share of regional housing need. And it's also a planning target, which is often confused with a requirement for production or actually building units. That's not what RHNA is. It's a target for zone capacity. So how does this process work? Well, it actually began back in several years ago in early 2019. The state of California made the determination that for this cycle, it was short 3.5 million housing units. So that was the statewide target. And it went through a process of allocating that out to different regions throughout the state. And the SCAG region, which covers Alhambra, was allocated 1.34 million units as a part of that process. And so SCAG then works with all of its representative jurisdictions over the course of almost a year to develop a methodology of how it's going to allocate those 1.34 million units to all the jurisdictions within the SCAG region. And through that process, Alhambra was allocated 6,825 units in total. On this table, we're doing a few things. We're comparing the RHNA 5 cycle, which ran from 2013 to 2021, with the RHNA 6 cycle. And there are a couple of observations here that just jump off the page. The first is you can see this significant uptick in the number of units that have been allocated to the community. It's a big jump. For Alhambra, it's about 450% increase. We can also see that the RHNA is not just a single number. It's not just 6,825. It's allocated across different income categories, and the capacity in Alhambra, the capacity allocated to lower income households, which are households that at least that earn at least 80% or less of median income in the region, is about 41%. It's important to know that Alhambra is not being singled out. They're not alone in being singled out in this process in terms of having a larger number than in the last cycle. As a percentage of existing housing units, Alhambra's RHNA is about 22%. That's about a middle of the pack among peer cities in the San Gabriel Valley. So why is this RHNA number so high? I get this question asked fairly often, and there's a very, excuse me. Pardon me. Yeah, so I get this question asked pretty often, and there's a really good reason for it. And the reason is that over the last 20 years, the state of California has exhibited chronic underproduction of housing. Which is a major problem both statewide and here in the San Gabriel Valley. Now, when you have underproduction of housing, it leads to a whole host of issues related to housing issues. It leads to price increases, which I'm sure everybody in the community has observed, and in the absence of income growth, where prices increase relative to income, it creates significant problems around cost burdening. And cost burdening is when households spend more than 30% of their income on housing. When that happens, they don't have money to do other things. And sadly, one in 3 households in Alhambra are currently classified as cost burdened. It also leads to overcrowding. This is where, as a result, in part of cost burden, more people are living in homes than there actually are, or living in homes where there are not as many rooms per person. Rooms, not just bedrooms, but rooms in the home. And in Alhambra, 1 in 6 households are experiencing that condition. And both these rates in Alhambra are actually higher than the regional averages for the SCAG region. So the project that I'm working on is called the housing element, and it relates directly to RHNA, and we're going to just do a quick overview of what that is and how the two are interrelated. So first, the housing element is a required component of the general plan. And the general plan, if you're not familiar, you could think of it as an instruction manual that guides decisions the city makes about a range of things, from mobility, health and safety, land use, and in this case, housing decisions. Unlike other general plan elements, it's a required element, so it has to be updated on an 8-year planning cycle. And it is also the only element of the general plan that is required to be reviewed, and the state has the authority to review and certify it as a part of the general plan. And the department that does that is the Department of Housing and Community Development, commonly referred to as HCD. If you hear me say HCD, that's what I'm referring to. So discussions around housing often center around, discussions of, yes, we want more housing in our community, or no, we don't want any more housing, this kind of yes or no dynamic. When we're talking about the housing element, it's really important to understand that this is not an exercise in yes or no. As you saw in the first part of the presentation around RHNA, the actual amount of housing as a part of this process is predetermined. It's determined on our behalf by SCAG and the state of California. So the housing element is really where we get into discussion about where housing should go, what type of housing is most suitable for Alhambra in the context of having to meet this obligation of regional housing need, and how the city can plan for it and execute on delivering that level of capacity. So the housing element itself has 4 to 5 major components. The first is an assessment of housing needs. So we take a look at existing, projected, and special housing needs. And so this is where we take a look at need across income categories. We take a look at housing need for seniors or persons with special needs. and try to document where there are specific areas in the community where a policy could address a specific housing need. We also take a look at governmental and non-governmental constraints. And so you could think about these as conditions that may be limiting housing production in the community. It could be excessively high fees. It could be just a lack of land or expensive land or expensive construction conditions. And so we're going through and documenting those to the extent possible that we can find constraints that may be limiting housing development. We also do a site-by-site level inventory. So we look at a very granular level and try to identify sites within the community that have zone capacity to accommodate the city's planning targets. And then we also do a review of the previous housing element housing plan, the programs that were put in place 8 years ago, and make a determination of how effective they were at achieving the objectives that they set out to achieve. And based on that review, we make recommendations on new housing programs and policies that the city could implement to address new conditions that we're finding in both the constraints analysis and housing needs analysis. So we kind of update that playbook or instruction manual for the city. I alluded to this previously, but it's always worth referencing again. RHNA and the housing element do not pose a mandate for actually building housing units for construction. But the intent of the process is that by the city taking an active role in removing any barriers to development, by providing an inventory and adequate sites with zone capacity for development, and instituting policies and programs that are supportive of housing development, the market should be able to function correctly and deliver housing where housing is needed. So another thing I often hear is like, what if we say no? What if, as a community, we say this is too big of a mandate, we don't want to do it. What happens to us then? Well, housing policy is a world of carrots and sticks, and there's a penalty for not being compliant, and there are major penalties. The first would be that the city would be determined to have an incomplete general plan, and it could be sued by developers, by advocacy groups, or even the state of California itself could sue the city. And there's precedent for that. It would also make the city ineligible for the carrots. So by providing these really high RHNA numbers, the state has also put into place significant funding mechanisms that can fund a range of programs within the city that, if without a compliant housing element, the city would be ineligible for those funding programs. And it also means that the city would automatically be defaulted to having to go through this process again in 4 years. So instead of 8. So instead of a 4-year cycle, you've got an 8-year cycle. You would be going through this entire process all over again. And the unaccommodated RHNA from this cycle that the city would choose, hey, we're not going to accommodate that, just gets pushed into the next cycle. And so the burden, 4 years from now would be even significantly higher, and so we'd just be kicking the can down the road. And so that kind of brings us to where we are today. That sets some context for what the housing element is and how it relates to RHNA. And we're really at the stage in our project where we are starting to take a look at some potential solutions. So how can the city take action that best suits the vision for the community in the context of having to play within the sandbox, within this RHNA target that we are effectively mandated to try to hit. And I'm going to walk through a few potential things that are common. And then we're going to open it up to a brief poll. But first, let's set a little bit of context about the magnitude of this mandate. So as I'm doing this work, redevelopment of existing uses is much harder than developing vacant land, because you have to account for the value of existing uses and the actual uses themselves. And this makes it exceptionally hard on communities like Alhambra that are effectively landlocked and have no vacant land to develop new housing on. So almost all of this target needs to happen through redevelopment. And so our initial analysis right now has identified existing development. So projects that are in the pipeline or being considered or proposed or under construction, and capacity potential on redevelopment sites that have been previously identified. At best, we think that can account for about half of this required capacity that we have to meet. So this means that we have a shortfall, and that shortfall adds up to about 3,000 to 4,000 units that must be addressed through some form of policy, program, or land use changes. So what is 4,000 units? And so for context, at existing density, allowed densities in high density areas, so the areas of the city that currently allow the most density, this equates to an area about the size of the Alhambra golf course if it was all dropped in one spot. So, so it's not an insignificant change here. So, so considering again that the housing element is a where and how exercise, we start to talk about some of these paths. And it's important to note that these are not predetermined. We have not made any decisions. The reason we're doing these conversations with the community now and in other mediums is to get your feedback on what path is most important for the city, or the most appropriate for the city of Alhambra to take. And the first of which is what I call subtle densification. So this is a path that would impact most single family areas across the city, but it would be more distributed, more across the city in a more subtle way than a more meaningful large change in one small or a particular part of town. And so right now we're taking a look at things like subtle densification through accessory dwelling units. An accessory dwelling unit, if you're not familiar with the term, you can think about it as like a guest house or a garage conversion. It's a separate unit that's typically between 4 and 1,000 square feet that is either attached or separate from an existing property. They're allowed outright by state law. And the city has been seeing some ADU development, but this could be a path to promote that a little bit more aggressively. At the state level, you probably are familiar with other laws that are that have been previously proposed or in the pipeline that address kind of large-scale statewide changes in single-family zoning that would allow duplexes and other things. If passed, ultimately that would supersede any local laws, but those things have not been pushed through at this point in time. Another path would be upzoning in low and medium density areas. So this is cities like existing R2 and R2 zone mostly. And so this would be allowing effectively more density in the same amount of space in areas where housing is currently allowed. Another path would be to get more targeted and say, well, we don't want to spread it thin. We want to put more housing in particular areas of town. And so where's that most appropriate? This would be higher density development, maybe in the downtown core. So you'd see taller buildings, more density in this area. Could be along existing commercial corridors. So higher density development in areas that currently allow housing, but are concentrated more in corridors. We could take a look at upzoning and allowing more density in existing high density residential areas. So these are areas that have already been determined as being appropriate for higher density development. And then finally, a path would be to take a look at allowing housing in more areas than is currently allowed. And so this is, parts of Garfield, Eastman Corridor, the industrial areas to the west, and a significant portion of the Valley Boulevard corridor. So that's the slideshow, and so I believe then we have a brief poll that we can put up and ask a few questions, and then we can take some questions via the chat. Or if you want to raise your hand and speak. I'm going to stop sharing. And again, here's our 3 poll questions. Again, the 3rd poll question, once you get there, please respond in the chat box, in the Q&A. And as we go through some of these, I can provide a little bit of context if you like. And so, as I mentioned before, on question 1, do you think the city should take a more aggressive approach marketing accessory dwelling units? This would be, citywide development programs to encourage construction of ADUs in residential zones. Again, ADUs are already allowed in Alhambra, but this would be activities that the city could take to more aggressively promote ADU development through marketing campaigns, incentives. Some cities are developing pre-approved plans that are off the shelf that make it easier to get ADUs permitted and put through. So on the second question, do you think the city should explore changes in zoning to add density to existing medium and high residential areas? And so little context here. This means, as I said, adding more homes in the same amount of space. Depending on the magnitude of what that change is, it could result in a change in the built environment. So, for example, you might see a cluster of cottages in a little pocket area of the neighborhood, or in low-rise areas, or in low-density areas, or you might see low-rise apartments in medium-density areas. You might see taller buildings in existing high-density areas. And to the third question, the final approach would be to allow housing in places where it's not currently allowed. This would certainly change the way that those areas function, because it would be allowing an entirely new land use in that area. And so, for context, as I mentioned, some of the places that are the most applicable would be Valley Boulevard, would be Garfield Corridor, East Main, and the industrial areas in the west part of the city. But you're not limited to responding to one of those areas. If there's a particular site or comment that you have about this issue, if there's any and all feedback on this question is welcome. You can identify one of those corridors or one of those areas or sites, or anything that you've observed in the community. And I'm going to pause for just a moment or two and give folks some time to enter those comments, and then we'll jump back into this here in just a moment. And we have 12 attendees so far right now. And so we've got 7 responses. So we'll give one more minute and see if anybody else wants to respond to the poll. And if not, then we will proceed. Just give me just maybe 30 more seconds here. Not seeing much more activity. All right, then I think we could probably close the poll. And just for some results, if you're not seeing them, I'll read them aloud. To our first question on ADUs, 29% said yes, we should be promoting ADUs, 71% said no. To the question of upzoning existing medium and high density residential areas, we had 57% say yes and 43% said no. We did receive a few comments to question 3 on areas that that would be suitable. This has been common actually among most of the town halls to discuss, take a look at the golf course. We're seeing concern over industrial areas being consistent with housing, East Main Corridor, airspace above the railroad tracks. These are all great comments. So thank you for providing your feedback. We'll be sure that the city takes these and they make their way into our consolidated feedback from all of our town halls, which I did not preface with. If you aren't familiar, at the beginning of the presentation, this is the 3rd of 5 town halls that we're doing. So if you'd like to participate again, we'll be doing 2 more of these in the middle of next week. So Van, we did have some questions that I do see Jose has his hand raised, and so I'll let you drive, and then I can field questions to the extent, let people comment, and I can field questions to the extent that I can answer them.
Jose, you can unmute.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Chris. Great presentation. Yeah, so my name is Jose Luis Espinosa. I just had a quick question. On slide 19, I noticed a category called potential underutilized. If you could go into detail what that actually encapsulates. And a follow-up to that is, what category within slide 19 would account for existing vacant land?
Yeah, so so these categories, so proposed are clearly projects that are in the pipeline that we've received from the city. The designation for SP, that's existing capacity that's identified within specific plan areas. And so specific plans are documents that guide land use decisions around a specific property or a specific corridor or a delineated area. Vacant land, there's only a couple of vacant sites in Alhambra. I think
right.
There's 1, maybe 2 high density sites that are very small. It's an acre or so, and then we found like 6 infill, single family infill sites. So taken together, vacant land capacity is 40 units. It's nothing, right. Absolutely nothing. So then we broke up existing underutilized and potential underutilized into 2 categories. So the first is, I currently identified underutilized capacity into 2 categories. The first is what we call existing, are sites that were effectively in the previous housing element that didn't develop. So these are sites that 8 years ago, the city pointed to and said, hey, these are potential candidate sites that we think are available for redevelopment. Among those sites, a bunch of them actually developed. And we also went through a process of saying, yeah, that one probably shouldn't have been included. And so we got rid of the ones that we didn't think remain suitable for redevelopment. And then this category for potential underutilized, because the target back then was so small, they effectively took the kind of low-hanging fruit and stopped there. What we did is we said, okay, well, if we took a look at the broader city under existing zonings and set some criteria for redevelopment, make some assumptions about lot consolidation, take a look at existing uses, values of existing values of structures and buildings, what can we squeeze out of potential redevelopment through that process? And we put together a algorithmic model that did that, looked at 40,000 permutations and sorted them at the most efficient. And this is what we think we could get out of existing zoning through that process.
Got it. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Eric, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, great, nice presentation, Chris. Thanks. Given that the RHNA allocation, the majority of that allocation is for non-market rate housing, which is the most difficult type of housing to get built, and given our dismal track record in building affordable housing and maintaining those covenants in the past, what can the city do to incentivize that, to help meet that allocation. I've been hearing things from city council saying that, well, we're going to do it via ADUs, or we're going to do it via the IZO that we have. But those are unrealistic. I mean, the ADUs, which I encourage, but that's basically putting the onus on homeowners. The IZO at 15%, that would require over 20,000 market rate units in order to meet our affordable allocation. So, what are the things specifically we could do to help incentivize things like social housing models, public housing models that would provide the biggest bang for the buck in terms of, affecting that allocation while minimizing the footprint on space, traffic, basically minimizing our carbon footprint. And I ask that with a reminder that, the city has in the past used eminent domain for less publicly, oriented reasons. In the aughts, the city used eminent domain purely for retail development, which was, so why can't we use something like that for social housing or public housing models? Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, and I'll do my best to address some of this. I won't go down the path of discussing why the city does or does not use eminent domain for different uses, but I'll try to keep it as it relates to the housing element to the extent that I can. Just for some context, the inclusionary housing ordinance does not come into our consideration for of allocating lower income capacity. So the state doesn't allow us to do that. It doesn't allow you to say, okay, well, we're going to require 15% of all housing units be affordable and count that. You can't do that. So that actually doesn't count toward our allocation at all. So as a part of this process, we have to identify specific sites that we think meet criteria that are suitable for affordable housing development, and the state provides some guidelines on that. If you're familiar, so effectively we need to be looking at sites that are above a certain size threshold, so that those sites have the economies of scale to be able to develop affordable housing. They have to be located in areas of opportunity. So we're not in a situation where communities, this is the firmly furthering for housing rules, where the state doesn't want to see jurisdictions just putting all your affordable housing in low opportunity areas. So those are some of the things that we're taking a look at when we start to look at how we're allocating our lower income RHNA to specific sites. To the other part of your question, we are looking at some of the things that the city can do. The city is doing some of these already. So some of the strategies that some cities put into place are, disposition of existing city property. The city has 2 projects that are affordable housing projects proposed right now that we're on city property. We'd like to see more scale associated with that, but obviously the city is doing what it can with the property that it owns. Some cities effectively purchase and dispose of property, what we call buying down land. So they purchase land at market rates and then sell it effectively at a loss to help subsidize affordable housing development. Many jurisdictions are taking a look at affordable housing trust funds to help subsidize development. I'm working on one right now in the city of Bakersfield, where the city is leveraging existing funds, new funding resources from the state, philanthropy to try to develop a fund that on an ongoing basis can fund affordable housing. The city has an in lieu fee for its inclusionary housing ordinance that could feed into something like that. So those are some strategies that the city can take to help promote affordable housing. But man, affordable housing is just really, really, really hard to develop. And anything is really hard to develop, especially in a redevelopment context. And when you talk about it in an affordability perspective, it's it perpetuates the issue. So it's not an easy thing to come up with a solution for. I'm going to
have questions in the Q&A.
Yeah, we can go through a few questions in the Q&A and I can answer them to the extent that I can. I'll just start at the top. Yes, so to Ari's question here, East Main housing element and Code Alhambra pertain to alignment with the general plan as it pertains to zoning. Parts of it, yes, and so the housing element will have to be consistent with the general plan, and if to the extent that it requires land use changes, then the housing element doesn't actually make those changes. It says, hey, these are some changes that need to be done, and the city has a period of time by which it needs to execute on those changes, study, explore, and execute on those changes. And that period is generally 3 years, but the city of Alhambra is already in the process of doing its code update. So we would expect that any recommendations that come out of the housing element happen fairly quickly because the city is already going through that process. And we've been communicating with the city's consultant for the East Main and Code update project throughout our process as well, so that so we kind of know where each of those processes are at. Ari also asks, are these rental housing numbers or purchase to? When I talk about production, I believe this was. It was all housing types, including special needs housing types. So a link to the general plan, we might be able to find it and drop in the chat, but it's on the city's community development page. There's a link to all kinds of planning documents there. The previous housing element is there. Any specific plan is there. There's information about zoning code, ADUs, all kinds of things. And you could also go to alhambrahousingelement.com. That is a project website for my project, and we've consolidated some of that information there as well, in addition to some documents, previous presentations that I've given, documents that we've produced so far. We have a RHNA 101 memo there, and there's a video recording of the workshop that we did several months ago. So you're welcome to go there for any additional information. You can also sign up to receive updates on this process. So if you haven't done that already and you'd like to get an email whenever something changes for us, you're welcome to do that. We're taking a database there and pushing information out as it's available and notices. See, Jorge here says, do site analysis include an evaluation of potentially repurposing sites such as the golf course? We are looking at repurposing sites, and the golf course is becoming an emerging topic, and so we will take note of that. We've heard that from the community, and so yes, we're looking throughout the city for sites that both allow housing currently and don't currently allow housing. Lewis looks like you may have a question or a comment. I'll see if I can address it. 41% of the RHNA is low, very low income categories. Talking about the villages with no units whatsoever. So the villages came in prior to the city's inclusionary housing ordinance, and I know that it's still in flux. I know there's some negotiations going on with the number of units that will be reserved by affordability level. I don't think that's a final determination, but Lewis, there are some units I think being considered, but I don't have that number right now, and I don't think that it's determined at this point. SCAG's process for allocating RHNA benchmarks. I could do an entire presentation on this if you wanted another half hour of me talking. But in a nutshell, there were two primary metrics. It was the percentage of households that are located within a geography of high quality transit areas, and also the percentage of the population of households that are within have access to a share of regional jobs, and so it was really about transportation and jobs access. I did a presentation several months ago where I had a graphic that showed the city of Alhambra against all the other SCAG jurisdictions, and the fact of the matter is Alhambra actually scored pretty high on those metrics. Most of the San Gabriel Valley cities did, but Alhambra was in the top quartile in both of those categories, which in part led to its size, the size of its RHNA allocation. Alhambra passed an ordinance a few years ago that limited ADUs. Is that correct? It actually didn't limit ADUs; it expanded the allowance of ADUs. And that was in response to state law. So the state has produced a lot of legislation dating back to 2017 that requires cities to allow ADUs in some capacity. And so yeah, I wasn't working for the city at the time, but I understand that the 2017 ordinance was to bring the state or the city into compliance with state ADU law. And right now, I believe the city is in the process of taking a look at updating that ordinance because new legislation has happened to be consistent with state law. But the city's planning department is enforcing state law as if it was adopted by the city as required. We're saying bill on the golf course, ADUs in multifamily areas. Yes. These look like they were responses to question 3, so I'll keep moving through some of these. East Main corridor, airspace. How does the housing element connect to transportation and planning? Specifically, if you bring more people to live here, then you're bringing more cars and traffic. It seems SCAG would be interested in managing traffic as well as housing. Yes, it does. It does relate to transportation and planning. So like I mentioned, the housing element needs to be consistent with the with other elements of the general plan. And so to the extent that the housing element identifies significant changes that would impact mobility components, then the city would take a look at updating those areas as well. More housing along East Main Valley. What's the unit count on units already in the pipeline, and what is the capacity for ADUs? Okay, so the units already in the pipeline is around 1,100. It's in flux, obviously, because a big piece of that is the Villages project, which at one point in time was over 1,000 units, and it was 800. Now it's down to 775. So that number is fluctuating a little bit, but there's we're tracking right now it at about 1,100, 1,150 units. In terms of capacity for ADUs, that's a great question. We're in the process of working through that right now. I think there's actually a significant capacity in Alhambra because the Alhambra does have a lot of single family homes on larger lots with detached structures, and those are all conditions that are generally conducive to ADU development. Do low-income housing require social services support as a part of the general plan? Not as part of the general plan, but some low-income housing types do require social services. The city's project right now that we're looking at, Chapel, I believe, will have some social services attached to it. So it just depends on the character and nature of the actual project. 710 stub airspace, state land available for housing. I don't have an answer to that, Ari. I'm not sure what the current status is of the planning around the 710 airspace. Are these meetings recorded, and can you listen to them again and ask a question at the next meeting? Van, could you answer that one? I think we are recording this. I'm not sure where they will be posted or if they will be posted. But Debbie, this was a question from you. It looks like you're welcome to show up at the next one and ask a question there as well.
To answer that, yes, they are being recorded, and yes, they'll be posted on our website under the events page for the link to this town hall originally. Okay, excellent. All right, then we just have some more comments about location of where some housing we could look at for some housing. And Ari has a comment about the Villages not being in the pipeline, but there's some state regulations around what can and cannot be included, and the way that we interpret it as it exists today, we can think of the Villages either as a project or as a site. At any rate, we can talk about it as meeting capacity in some sense. So I think you're right, Ari, in the sense that there's some ambiguity into how that capacity gets counted, but it effectively can be counted the way we interpret the state regulations. So Eric has a question here. Can you describe your proposed plan for how you would meet the affordable allocation from a realistic standpoint? ADUs and IZOs relying on the market won't do it. So it's up to local governments to facilitate this. So yes, so the question is a good one, Eric. As I mentioned, we will be assigning lower income RHNA consistent with the state guidelines to the sites that we think are appropriate for affordable housing development. It's really difficult in areas like Alhambra where the city is very parcelized. So when we took an initial look at zoning density and existing site size, it's very, very difficult to assemble a site that meets these criteria in the city. And so the city is looking at things that it can do to promote lot consolidation, to allow more sites that meet those criteria. As I mentioned before, there are a range of programs that the city can put into place, take a look at trust funds or partnerships with, expanding partnerships with affordable housing developers. We will be in a sense also attempting to overshoot the capacity for lower income RHNA, and that's also in response to state law. So yes, it's those are some of the things we're looking at. If you have other ideas, Eric, send them along to me. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about that. If there's something unique to Alhambra's community you think is an opportunity that we're not catching. So. With that, we got about 5 minutes to go. I don't have any more questions here that haven't been answered in the chat. Van, I don't know if we want to just kind of one last ping for any question and commentary, and if not, we can let people go here a few minutes early. I got Eric with his hand raised.
Yeah, so can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, you mentioned affirmatively furthering fair housing. Great point. I appreciate that. One area of the city where I live in is in District 1, East Main Corridor. We have some of the highest property values in the city here. We do not suffer from the contamination and traffic issues that our brothers and sisters in the southwest region of the city do. It seems like the right place to build affordable social public housing. I mean, it would further fair housing. It's one area that we, that type of housing has been shown to have the least impact on traffic, affordable housing, combined with incentives for public transportation. And it's people. I mean, people talk about having businesses here on the East Main Corridor, and it's failing. The businesses fail. It's because we need people, and we need and people who use affordable housing are some of the type of people who actually patronize the local businesses more than most. So to me, that makes sense. And it's also, as I mentioned before, it's the way to minimize our carbon footprint in terms of really attacking that affordable allocation. And doing it, people say the RHNA is extreme. Well, that may be, but then it requires extreme measures and upzoning and doing it in a way that incentivize the public housing aspect that can really address that portion of the RHNA that will not get addressed by the market. So that's all I had to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, I think we.
Hi, Debbie.
Yeah, Debbie's up next.
Hi, I've listened to several of the meetings now, and there's a lot of information, and I don't have time really to ask questions because I'm just hearing this information. Are these recordings where we can access them when we have a quiet time and listen to them and maybe ask some questions at the 2 next meetings?
Yes.
Go ahead, Van. You have the floor on that part.
Sure. Yes, they are being recorded and they will be posted on the website. Each council member has their events listed under the events page. And so that's where I will post it on their page for each individual town hall.
Okay, so I can go to the website, look up you and events, and I can hear the meeting that was today and the one that was done on the 25th. And I can ask questions then from those meetings I have.
They won't be posted today, but they'll be posted Monday.
Okay, but we have, when is the next meeting?
I can run through those real quick. So the next one will be on Wednesday, April 14th at 6:00 p.m. And then there will be another one on Thursday, April 15th, also at 6:00 p.m.
I'd like to say thank you for the meeting today at Saturday, because when you do them in the evening, it's very hard for people that are working and coming home from work or picking up kids to hear everything in an evening time. So the meeting on today was very appropriate. I appreciate it. So, and thank you for letting me know where the meetings are posted. That's it.
Thank you, Debbie.
Go ahead, Marisol.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm just joining. Debbie, I'm piggybacking off Debbie. I didn't know if this is the appropriate forum to make a comment, leave a comment, or I should just wait to gather more information. I'm sorry. It is Saturday. It is a great time to have a meeting. Thank you so very much for taking the time. Unfortunately, it's spring break and I'm a realtor, so I'm in between showing times. I'm trying to squeeze this in. But I just kind of wanted to also, I don't know what, I guess I appreciate another meeting or another place we can address going over some of the information that was dispersed that I might have missed on today. Is that possible?
Yeah, as we mentioned, there will be 2 more of these town halls. So you're welcome to join us on Wednesday at 6:00 or Thursday at 6:00. And these will also be posted, and so you can view the recordings on the city's website. If you also go to alhambrahousingelement.com, we take inventory of previous events, and it also has a link there to the city's direct event website, so you don't have to go dig in there either. So one of those 2 ways you can find a recording of this and or participate in the next couple of days, or on Wednesday or Thursday of next week. And this is also just a good opportunity, I think, to talk about our process here. We'll be having more opportunities for community engagement beyond these remaining town halls. Once we have a draft of the report and take comments, the city has, or the community has an open comment period. So we'll have a period where you can review the entire thing. And
yeah, that's what I need actually, because just what I think I might, like I said, I've missed quite a bit of this. I'm so sorry, because I just wanted to know if it was addressed that even though RHNA has given, I live in District 1, that's why I specifically wanted to be in this town hall, and given the fact that RHNA, it is a fact that City of Alhambra is giving 6808 units, but the reality is we just have to, from what my understanding, and I don't know if you covered that with the survey or so on and so forth, was that we just have to create a platform as far as to show that housing can be built if we're already a built out city, number one, because we're a very old established city that has really, tried to develop and build. And really quickly, when Mr. Sonato was saying about District 1 and affordable housing and so on, we're one of the districts that does have affordable housing, Section 8 housing. I believe there's 2 other districts. I'm not sure if it's District 5 and 4 or 3 and 5 that have 0 affordable. We have the senior center, we have the, like I said, off the Lentz Vega, we have the Section 8. So we do have that. We do have, District 1, we have our own set of maybe not right now that we're seeing the traffic congestion. Well, Alhambra has been reported, given a report card of 4 as far as traffic is concerned. I also want to make another statement that many times affordable housing on developed owned property is not, I'm a realtor, so that's not possible. And developers have a say on what tier of, because affordable housing that's a little bit of a cliche or blanket statement and misnomer that people say, oh, well, we want affordable housing. Well, sure, I would like affordable housing for my children. But the reality is on developed owned property, that doesn't happen. It's up to the developer and what tier of affordability that they're able to give it. So I'm sorry, I don't know if you touched on these issues, if we'll further discuss, because these are also issues that need to be looked into to say, okay, we need to create housing. How are we going to do it? Where are we going to do it? Not that we're trying to be elitist or whatever, but we are a desirable area. But people, we need all areas to be desirable, and we want everyone to have a safe, clean, walkable, desirable, safe way of life here in the city of Alhambra. Not today, but in the future. And with the shift of the pandemic that has happened, I don't think this is going to be the last of it, really. I think we have to take that into consideration, definitely, instead of over congesting and over developing without really having a plan. My thing is, I go back to, I'm not against development. I say the city really needs to have a specific plan, a guided plan, not just given numbers and go, okay, what are we gonna do with all this? Okay, ADUs, let's just jump on that. Or let's really look at the areas where we can bring in development and build wisely, smartly, not just cram and stuff everything just because we have to. Let's look at how we're going to grow, you know, due to the fact that we have limited space. We're already searching for green space enough as it is for everyone that does live here. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents, but thank you so much. And I'll keep looking forward to the meetings.
Yeah, thank you. Show up to the next one.
I mean, I hope so. I mean, I have a lot more to say. I'm just so sorry I missed so much, but there's just things I think we need to be calm and take these steps into consideration. I hope you cannot, you know, as a builder, an architect, you can't build a house without a plan. You have to have a vision. You have to have a plan. You have to have guidelines, setbacks. It's not okay to say, oh, let's just topple this section with that. Excuse me, have you seen our section? Have you looked at us? We do have value. And there is something to be said about that. I'm not trying to say we're most valuable. I'm just saying there is value in walkability, green space, clean air. People are craving that. People want that more from homes as opposed to just overdevelopment. So that's why they're leaving downtown. Okay, sorry, that's it. I promise. Thank you so much. I appreciate this. And I look forward to speaking with you more.
Thank you. I think we have one more hand raised here.
Go ahead, Ari.
Hey, so yeah, this is Ari Gutierrez. I'm also a resident of the District 1. And I think just evidenced by the comments by Eric and Marisol is the fact that these town hall meetings are not really very engagement. They're very one way, you know, and I appreciate the opportunity to ask questions. As you know, as you noticed, I had a lot of questions. But we also aren't given the opportunity to give the ideas, as Marisol just, you know, as both Marisol and Eric did. So I'm sorry, but I feel that these are lacking in that. Also, I wanted to highlight that in your presentation, you had the numbers from 2000 to 2019. And I noticed that Glendale had a huge number. Well, I recently, like a week ago, drove to Glendale and I hadn't been there in years. It is crazy how much tall buildings that they have built right up to the edge of the sidewalk. You know, it's not good. It's not a good feel. And that is not what Alhambra is. And that is not what we need here. You know, we want to make sure that, sure, we want to be responsible and do our fair share for this from a state level, but at the same token, because we have jobs, because we have an economic program, we are now saddled with more housing and having to use up our airspace to do it. I don't think that's fair. And where really maybe the state should be looking at developing commerce and jobs in other areas that have low numbers in that area, so that we don't have to move people around. It's a big old shell game, and I just don't feel that it's fair. And also for those of us who have invested in Alhambra, you know, we want to make sure that our investment stays, continues from a value standpoint, and that we are able to provide that value for ourselves in terms of quality of life, for our family, and for our the future generations. And and I do see purchasing my home as a route to retirement planning, and so I wouldn't want that to go away either, because we're trying to appease a state law, a state rule, a random rule about a fair share and about where housing should go, and then it gets planted in areas that don't make sense from a traffic standpoint and from an management of land space, land use. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Okay, then I don't see any other hands raised. So with that, I would just like to thank the attendees that showed up today to voice your comments and provide questions. As I said, please go to the website and sign up for updates, and you're welcome to send emails and commentary through that platform as well. Join us on Wednesday and Thursday next week. We'll be happy to have you again and address any more of your questions. And so thank you for taking the time on a sunny Saturday to be involved in your community. Appreciate it.